Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Standing Committee for Monday, June 17th, 2019. Today we acknowledge that this event is taking place on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. We are thankful to share in the special spirit of this place, rich in the energy of Mother Earth, our ancestors, and the love of all creation. And seeing that, I'd like to turn to Councillor MacLeod for the adoption of the agenda.
Can we adopt the agenda?
Thank you. Before we start, I just would like to mention in terms of the order. So we have a standing committee meeting for the next half hour or so. For those who are at home, perhaps watching live stream or through Rogers, or who are in the audience this afternoon, we will transition at the end of this meeting directly into a development and operations meeting. At that time, I'll turn the chair over to Councillor Jeffrey and those members, Councillor Berman and Councillor MacLeod, thank you for being here this afternoon for the first half hour, and then we'll transition into our development operations meeting. I guess, thank you. So step one, I require a seconder in addition to your moving. So Councillor Berman, all those in favor, that's carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? And seeing none, if anything arises, you know what to do. Going to agenda item number 4, staff reports. First one that I'll put on the floor is T 2019-14, Strategic Asset Management Policy. And that the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee receive and refer the following recommendation to the next meeting of Council. Staff recommendation that staff report T 2019-14 be received and Council approve the Strategic Asset Management Policy attached to this report, and further that Council directs staff to publish the Strategic Asset Management Policy on the town's website as required by Ontario Regulation 588-17. And with that said, I will turn to Treasury Leonard for her report.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The context for municipal asset management planning in Ontario was a realization that many municipalities were and still are facing challenges to fund their infrastructure at levels that ensure its sustainability. Aging assets, increased renewal needs, and pressures from climate change, to name a few of those pressures, have brought us to this point. The provincial infrastructure strategy has focused on strengthening asset management planning since 2012. Prior to 2012, less than 40% of municipalities had an asset management plan. Today, almost all municipalities have an asset management plan, and tomorrow 100% of municipalities will have up-to-date, robust plans that inform investment decisions. Ontario Regulation 588-17 is a progression of the strategy, and the first requirement of the legislation is a strategic asset management policy. This policy complements and supports a municipality's strategic plan and other core documents by affirming organizational commitment to asset management principles and philosophies, aligning and integrating asset management into an organization's strategic planning process, as well as other key plans and policies, guiding the asset management planning process and embedding asset management principles into ongoing capital operations and maintenance activities, defining asset management responsibilities and accountabilities for council, leadership, management, and staff, and supporting the formation of a culture that values asset management and makes it a priority. So this legislation is prescriptive in nature, laying out the elements that must be included in the policy. We have to have statements regarding, or principles regarding, strategic alignment, guiding principles such as the plan being forward-looking, budgeting and planning priorities, economic development, transparency, consistency, environmentally conscious, health and safety, community-focused, innovative, and integration with other plans and items that we develop. So in addition to the regulated principles, staff have included that a holistic view is required, clearly defined levels of service, risk-based, and affordability would be additional guiding principles. In terms of what else we have to include in the legislation, we have to discuss capitalization thresholds, governance and continuous improvement, budgeting, community planning, climate change, and stakeholder engagement. Capitalization thresholds have not been explicitly stated in this policy. However, it is time for our tangible capital asset policy to be reviewed and updated, which will allow for cross-referencing of the strategic asset management policy within the tangible capital asset policy. The governance aspects require definitions of roles and responsibilities for council, the CAO, the senior management team, and departmental staff. Climate change, which is widely recognized as one of the most urgent problems facing humanity. We know that human activity is warming the earth, and we know we have the knowledge, technologies, and resources to solve the problem. The regulation requires that the town articulates its commitment to mitigating and adapting to climate change. And finally, the last aspect of the policy or the legislative requirement that I think is critical in nature is a stakeholder engagement portion. And that is an integral component of the policy and the provincial asset management strategy. Through section 9 of the policy, the statements that we have put in there regarding meaningful engagement, what our expectations are from the town towards residents, what the town would expect the residents who are involved and want to engage would meet that commitment as a two-way partnership, and everybody would be understanding of each other's limitations and needs, and we would be able to build a much stronger, cohesive community in the process. So through you, Deputy Mayor, I believe that the policy that I have included in there does fulfill all of the legislated requirements, and I'm ready to take questions. How would that be?
Thank you, Treasurer Leonard. Before we take questions or open it up to the table, we'll open up to the public and to members of the gallery. And just a reminder for those who've arrived late, this is a Strategic Initiative Standing Committee meeting for the first half hour, and then we'll be moving into our Development and Operations Services Standing Committee. This is item 4.1 on the first agenda. If anyone would like to come forward from the public and speak to this item, please do. Okay, so I'll open it up to members of council. Questions? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have 3 questions, and I also have a little bit of information. So first, at the FCM AGM, I was able to participate in a stream of education that was omissions and carbon accounting gaps in the built environment, and procurement policies relative to life cycle approaches. So the key message in the workshop was that the #1 impact on our ability to lower carbon and to extend life cycle of our assets is through procurement. So for example, there's the availability of a concrete product that reduces carbon output by 10%, which is available at no additional cost. So concrete, instead of paving where appropriate, can extend the life of our asset, and the product that reduced carbon output addresses those carbon accounting gaps in the built environment. And an example is a municipality that might take step 1 is for the municipality not to procure products that do not provide the carbon impact of their product. And then step 2 is for the municipality not to procure products with a carbon emission over a certain level. And it was stated that this will be standard practice in 2 to 3 years, and so why not be ahead of the curve? So my first question is, I see that we address sustainability per se in a statement within the policy, and I'm wondering if it is possible or sensible to state under there a tie between our procurement policy development to link the environmental benefits and in extending the life cycle approaches of our assets. And I guess that first question would be through to either the CAO or the Treasurer or Director McDonald, whoever would like to take it.
Okay. Would you like to take that or directly?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Honor, nice, I love it.
You've been elevated.
Yes.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Jeffrey. I think some of that will be captured under section 5.0, which is the climate change provision. That provision is quite detailed in that it did talk about us considering the climate change impact of asset management. It doesn't actually speak to the procurement issue in there, but we can certainly add procurement in there. But the whole issue of climate change and looking at options and alternatives have been addressed in a general sense in the in section 5.0. The other issue with the procurement piece would have to be based on costs. So cost consideration, as you know, is one of the criteria we look at when we review requests for proposals. And I think if we were to include procurement as a condition in dealing with environmental impact, we'd have to look at how that relates to our procurement policy.
And just a response, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So I think that would be great. I just think what I'm looking for is a statement that we acknowledge that we need to link that procurement policy with this policy and how we can work between them for the betterment in both those areas. So if we can, however, if you think it's already covered, great, but if you think we can add one little more paragraph about the juncture or link to the procurement policy, that would be great.
Thank you.
That's one.
That was
All right.
the other two are fairly quick. So I just wanted to ask about the level of our predictability of the timing of repair requirements for our assets, and then also conversely those assets approaching end of life.
So through you to Director McDonald.
Certainly that is a major component of asset management, and each particular asset has a predictable lifespan, and you look at each on its own merits. Road paving and road surfacing, you look at the cracks, the type of cracks and how severe they are. When we look at assets like water main or sanitary sewer, we look at age, but as the asset gets older, we do other means of testing. We would video test or we would do videos of a sanitary sewer. So it is an integral part of our asset management plan, is looking at the predictability of the asset, its age, but also how it's performing. So it's just not assumed that the asset will perform as originally intended. You have to keep monitoring it. So as an important part of our whole asset management process.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, I know this is a question we ask at all times, at all junctures, and whether it be budget or our asset management, but are the reserves sufficient, and where are we at?
Yeah, Treasurer, like to take that one?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. No, our reserves are not sufficient. We are, I believe that I said at budget time that the infrastructure gap was still approximately $9 million at that point in time. We're not putting enough money away. We have exhausted the contingent reserves that we do have. So the answer is short, one quick little word, no.
That's it, thank you.
Questions? Anyone else around the table? Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is, I understand this is a policy to be followed up with a plan. Will these policies be implemented now, or do they await the plan? I don't know who that's directed to, perhaps I'm
Through you, Mr. Chair, the policy has to be implemented by the 1st of July. That is a legislative requirement, and I apologize for not getting it here sooner, but I had a couple other things to do.
Okay.
But the plan, we already have a plan completed in 2014, so what we're doing right now, over the next year, we will be getting the condition assessments and the inventory for stormwater assets to complete all of the planning again for the core assets, so we're ready for that ahead of the requirement on it. So the plan will come, and there will be other policies that will go hand in hand with both this and the plan itself.
Thank you, and I have a second question. Thank you. My second question is, there's recognition, and our treasurer spoke about it, with respect to feedback from residents by a means appropriate when service deficiencies or failures have been observed. And there's also recognition in the plan that safety is a big component of what the town's responsible for. And I was wondering then if we would be having, what our notification by appropriate means might be. And because what I'm thinking of is, I was looking also at the 2014 asset management plan earlier, and I know our roads, at least at that point, and the infrastructure was only, I think as I read it, 33% good. And we know there are certain roads that are awaiting, redo at the appropriate time. So I just want to know that our residents, if they feel there is a safety issue, in particular with respect to a road or some infrastructure, there's some means of contacting us to let us know there are deficiencies. So my question is whether that can be implemented.
Sure. And through to you, but may I ask a question of clarification? Were you you used the word notification, us notifying residents, or
No.
them notifying us?
Them notifying us.
That's what I thought,
Yeah,
okay.
thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you to Councillor Hamlin. Yeah, I mean, I think our residents are always welcome to send us through our website information that they deem to be interesting or appropriate. I mean, and I think we monitor that closely and we'll take their considerations into account. Through whether it's asset management or financial issues or customer service, I think we would always encourage our residents to provide us with feedback. The other point I would add as well is that we are looking at a much more robust consultation process as part of our budget deliberations. Part of the reason why we couldn't implement it in the last fiscal year was because of the municipal elections. But we're hoping to launch a draft consultation much earlier, much later in 2019 for the 2020 process. And as part of that, asset management will be considered as well. So that will be another opportunity for residents to provide us with feedback.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor McLeod?
I apologize if my question is too similar to the one asked by Councillor Jeffrey, but I don't think that it is. Through you, Mr. Chair, to our Treasurer. Last week we voted on motions regarding our surplus and our variance allocation and our reserve funds. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the interconnectivity of those plans and motions that we put in place last week and this asset management policy and how they sort of all work together from a managing our money point of view?
Through you, Mr. Chair. This, the policy that we're looking at tonight is going to guide how our strategy is to maintain those long-term assets. The asset management plans that we're working on are the ones that are going to look at the funding and the money and where it's going to come from. Presently, last week when we did pass the reserve and reserve fund, or the surplus allocation, we put approximately, we will have a reserve for life cycle replacements of approximately $5 million. And with the amount that we put in this year, we're just keeping our roads basically up to snuff, put it that way. We're not, well, I think this year Ross is getting a new toy, but other than that, then, the policy will drive the strategy of the plan itself. The plan is where we will determine the funding amounts, where we get that infrastructure gap that I talked about in terms of dollars at the 9 million, how we're going to actually pay for that over the long term. And hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, it does.
Okay. Any other questions from around the table? Okay, so I had read out the staff report, and if I could have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Doherty. Seeing no other questions, I'll call the vote. Those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Moving on to 4.2. This is PW 2019-11 increased budget request for the Capital Sanitary Sewer Program that the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee receive and refer the following recommendation to the next meeting of Council. Staff recommendation that staff report PW 2019-11 be received and Council authorize the increase of budget for the sanitary renewal project for by a total of $170,000 for a total construction portion of the budget of $1,170,000. And I'll turn this over to Director McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We recently tendered the Napier Street sanitary sewer project. The project is between Hume and Erie Street, and we received 3 bids on that project. The bid prices came in at between $1.1 million and $1.39 million. Our budget estimate for this particular aspect of the project was $1 million. We are confident that the pricing that was received was market pricing, but we feel that it's reflective of increases in construction values that have recently occurred over the last year. Another aspect of the project is it's about 1/3 the size of our previous projects. 7th and 8th Street were much larger projects, and so in terms of economy of scale, you get potentially higher pricing, higher unit pricing for doing less work than in that larger project. Another aspect I think that is important to note is we only seek these opportunities to come before Council when we're over budget, and I think it's important that Council knows that this is an exception. We have a number of tenders that we've awarded recently that have come in under budget. Paving is $50,000 under budget. Accessible shuttle or bus that we purchased is $30,000 under budget. Generator maintenance will have a savings of $87,000 over the next 2 years. Lab services, $80,000 under budget, and a number of other projects are on budget. So this is not normal to come before you and ask for increased budget, but it is one of those things that happen when we have a tender, and prices have increased since our budget estimate, which was well over almost a year ago now we started that. And so we're asking for this increase to move forward to with the project so it can start. The money for this project is funded from the sewer reserves for the entire project, and currently these reserves are sitting at $16.5 million.
Okay, thank you. Before opening it up to the table, is there anybody from the audience who would like to come forward and speak specifically to this item? Seeing none, we'll open it up to the table. Any questions from around the table? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you very much, and through you to Director McDonald. Once approved, or at least one of the tenders accepted, is there any danger that the price would go any higher than what you've estimated, or is that now a locked-in price?
Through the chair, these are committed prices. They've provided a very comprehensive bid, unit prices on every material that they're going to be using. So the only would be the unforeseen if they run into bad materials in the roadbed or some other unknown rock or something that was unforeseen. That would be the only factor that could have an impact on it. I think historically our sewer projects have come in on budget in terms of the tender commitments, and we have not had a major need to utilize contingencies, but we always have an allowance for contingencies for those unknowns. But I can say historically we've not had a need to use them.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the table? Okay, So having read the staff report and the recommendation to go to council, can I have a mover and seconder? Okay, Councillor Berman, and it's seconded by Councillor Hamlin. No further questions. All those in favor? It's carried unanimously. If I may, just before we move on to point number 5, to Councillor Hamlin, to your point about notification, which was a great point. I haven't seen it for a while, and I was remiss, it only came into a couple of people, but there actually is an address, and I'm just using it publicly, and it is for town hall inquiries. And now that I've pulled it up in front of me, I can't actually pull it up in front of me. I apologize. It is, townhall@collingwood.ca. And it goes right into our customer service ambassador, Chris Britton, being one of them, with clerk services. And anyway, I noted because it was an issue that came in this week, specific to Emerald Ash Boar, and the response that went out was fantastic. All of the appropriate staff were included, etc. So the communication in that particular case was excellent. So it's just an example. Townhall@collingwood.ca as a method for those who want to communicate can directly and get a response. So moving on to point 5 on our agenda. If there's anybody from the public who would like to come forward at this time and speak to any issue as it relates to strategic initiatives, please do so at this time. Welcome, Mr. Fryer.
Thank you.
Mr. Fryer,
I'll
you've got
sign the-
5
I'll sign
perfect.
the
You know
form.
the agenda or drill.
I'm going to address the elephant in the room. Why did the report on the judicial inquiry go to council instead of this SIC last week?
Fair question. Thank you.
Certainly through the chair to members of council and the public and anybody concerned about that process. There is always the ability for the CAO to put matters before a council agenda that don't go through the necessary standing committee, depending on the urgency, what the information is. And there was a decision that the sooner the information was released to the public, it was better to be put forward in that method.
Okay, I would just submit to council that it's best to come to SIC so the public has an opportunity to speak to it.
Fair comment, Mr. Fryer.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public that would like an opportunity to speak? Okay, seeing none then, I will call for an adjournment from this particular meeting. Councillor Hamlin, all those in favor? And it's carried. Thank you.